chance to talk to some colleagues from a different sector. Obviously, I come from the mining world, which has some differences in the approach and some of our challenges, but in reality, we're very similar. We've got a world that's looking to better understand how they're going to sustainably use their resources, how they're going to support their populations, and that brings us together in a clash of challenges, which we've pulled under the sustainability word, I believe. So just a little bit of history around Rio. As I mentioned, it's got a long history. It's a sort of multi-commodity mining company, second largest in the world. We employ about 55,000 people in about 40 different countries. So it's a large company in that respect, but it's also working in very diverse operating environments, from OECD to non-OECD. And I think from my point of view, the challenges are really acute in the non-OECD, and they're quite well anticipated there. But interestingly, we have seen challenges in Australia around taxation and other areas where our license to operate is being challenged. And I think picking up some comments again made earlier around how comfortable we are with sovereign risk, how are we dealing with our various stakeholders' views, I think is fundamental to how we as a business is going to be able to progress. So Rio Tinto's approach to sustainability touches on, I suppose, three key messages at the base of the slide behind me. And the first really looks at shared risk and mutual value. So shared risk, mutual value. And what we're looking at here is saying, okay, Rio Tinto is operating an asset. There are risks associated with that asset. But Rio Tinto need to share that with the other stakeholders who equally have got skin in the game. And rather than look at it as an isolated asset, we need to look at it integrated with the communities and the economies which we're supporting. And that talks to this point around mutual value. And it takes this from being isolated as the taker to actually being the partner. And that language has been something we've evolved over many years to allow us to have access to ground. And one difference between oil and gas and mining is the length of tenure. Our relationships are often 100 to 150 years in one location. So we have long-term assets that are easily targeted, you could say, easily taken from us through sovereign risk, but also can coexist very pleasantly and in an efficient manner. And that's one of the aspects around this mutual value concept. The second point is around collaboration, and collaboration around sort of creating trust between the various stakeholders. So one of our challenges early on was a diamond asset we found in Australia called Argyle. And there was a very strong traditional owners group there, which was a challenge for us to negotiate the rights to mine. And that took us many, many years through one of the first partnership agreements that took place. And that was allowing us as Rio Tinto to come in, working with the traditional owners to come up with something that was going to give mutual value, and it was going to be done in a collaborative fashion. The third point is around, I suppose, innovation, which brings us to where we are here today. And I think we need to look not what we do, about how we do it. That's the game-changing expression, I think. And we know in the mining world, we dig things out of the ground and we sell them. It's fairly binary. But how we do that is the difference. How do we deal with energy production? How do we make this as sustainable as possible? How do we have a positive impact? Whether that be on biodiversity, whether that be economics. So that the last piece is really around innovation, and I'm going to now talk a little bit around some case studies to bring this to life, because it's easy to have warm words. We can go to each other's websites and read the aspirational targets we have, but we need to kind of bring it to life. So we had a team over the last 5 years set aside to look at innovation, through a gentleman called John McGar, who's a charismatic character, very creative. And he tells a story about the future mine is a mango mine. And the concept here is that we'd discover an asset, a mine, and in certain situations we may be able to have dewatering, so we can produce water. Now if that mine is set in that environment it could be fine, it could be fairly inert, or it could be actually something that we're not able to employ a large number of people. And as we go to automation, that becomes a real challenge. So what do we do with the water, and what do we do with our social license? And how do we encourage support from the communities? Well, we irrigate. So why don't we irrigate the 50 hectares around, maybe 100 hectares around this asset? And why don't we enter partnerships with local agricultural services to start to see that they can benefit from this maybe supported or free irrigational system. And maybe that becomes a 50-kilometer buffer around our asset, so that when there's social unrest, we have early warnings. When there's issues around whether we should stay there and whether the government wants to take it off us, we've got a positive local community support for our work. So this kind of thinking about things as an opportunity to create a really stable mining opportunity became the sort of the mine of the future. And in that mine of the future, we have automated drills, automated haul trucks. We have a system where auto haul, and we have no individuals involved in those structures. And that's possible if we have other employment we can offer through the mangoes or whatever it may be. But the concept here is de-risking, both from a sovereign risk perspective and also from a more tangible health and safety risk, fatigue, and other wider factors. So nothing earth-shattering, but it comes at looking at how do we link security, link health and safety, link production, link blockades and impacts of operations. How do you link that together in something that sits and operates efficiently and effectively? So I use that as an example. We're working towards that at a number of our sites, which we'll hear more about in a moment. So risk management is a key motivation for us around sustainability. The second piece talks to financial returns. There are good arguments to be made to justify investing in some sustainable solutions that hit the bottom line pretty quickly. For example, when we look at some of our challenges around solar power in Australia, reducing the dependence on fossil fuels, no offense intended, and we then move to wind farms as well in the world of Divec in Canada. These are tangible ways we've kind of put forward good, sustainable, innovative in places. These 4 turbines up in the Arctic Circle operate in minus 40 degrees centigrade. There's been some innovative technology to achieve that. And those have made a bottom line impact around the amount of fuel being transported on the ice roads in that sector. In addition, just to call out a port in Fort Dauphin in Madagascar, when we're building large infrastructure projects, there's also an opportunity there to open up areas for commercial agriculture and for trade. So this port here funded jointly with a number of different players, including the IFC and the World Bank, to basically unlock the southern tip of Madagascar. Now, environmentalists may be challenged by, well, that's going to produce significant change in economic development, and we have to weigh that up against the poverty and the challenges of life there at the moment. But I think it's a good, tangible example where working together we can come up with something that moves forward the economics, it moves forward the needs of the mining sector with respect to our shareholders, but also targets very specifically the ability for commerce to follow with us and develop. So finally, just 2 quick examples from South Africa. When we look at sustainability, it's sometimes difficult to draw what are the opportunities, what's the business motivation. Yes, we can make things run cheaper. Yes, we can manage risks. But the third component is really around allowing us to grow effectively. So in this area, Richards Bay Minerals in South Africa, there's another resource next to the current plot it's a sand mining operation. And that resource is 25 kilometers away, and was protected and had a number of different caveats over it. And so we entered a negotiation of how are we going to bring this online. So what we relied on was our relationships. First of all, the rehabilitation approach we'd taken to the areas which we'd previously mined and returned that directly to the previous forest type, and the biodiversity data was supportive of that work. We also looked at how we were utilizing power and water, which are 2 key elements in the South African, and especially in Richards Bay area, and looking to minimize that. And using those kind of prerequisites, we then looked at, okay, if we were to move to this new area called Zulti South, how could we do that in a way that was going to work for the community? And that's given us both support in the local community, but also wider into government as well. So that gives us, I think, an element of a tangible example where investment in rehabilitation and investment in our wider relationships with the communities allows us to grow the business. So The last point is kind of a challenge that we're faced more and more at the moment. As some of our large mines enter the period of closure, we need to work out how do we close these large holes in the ground, how are we going to ethically leave that in the best form we can. And closure is a big challenge to the mining sector at the moment, and I know it's mirrored in aspects of the oil and gas sector. So first of all, it builds on these shared values around working together, collaboration, and those overused expressions around relationships with our stakeholders. But it is key to work out the criteria for closure. And then I think there's a big period of where we have to pause and look at innovative solutions. We need solutions that are going to work for all involved. Just closing and returning to as it was is not what the communities often want. The governments want to see reuse and additional commercial activity. The mining sector has a large liability here. So Rio Tinto itself has 8.6 billion set aside for closure. So these are not small numbers, these are material. And so we need to work aligning with sustainability, but innovation ideas around how do we do this. It builds on the relationships, as I mentioned. So I've just touched on a few different elements there, and hopefully you've got some themes to pick up for the questions later. But just to close, for me, the crux is that sustainable practices can deliver on a good rate of return for investing in them. There's proven examples that we have where those investments have given value. It's not just bottom line numbers, but it's also some of these license to operate, the intangible numbers, the above ground risks that are so impactful when they go wrong. The second point is around integration. We can't do this as an isolated external affairs, isolated environment team or communities team. You have to integrate the different viewpoints to bring it together. You can't work in isolation, and that's what makes this difficult. You also can't work as a company alone. You have to work in the wider stakeholders, which is painful. And you have to build capacity in those stakeholders to enable them to work in a similar fashion that enables us to move forward together. So we're being pulled in lots of directions. No, the group of stakeholders in the room does not have the same views as Rio Tinto, and nor do they agree within themselves. So there is a healthy dose of compromise required to move these elements forward. So I think collaboration, some elements of transparency about what we're doing, and really behind that is a trust within the players involved. So I hope that helps give you some picture of where Rio Tinto is in its journey. I think it is a journey. We are working slowly forward towards a place where we do get easier access. We do have good relationships that are positive at all sides.